Hello, everyone. Can everyone snap for me? Awesome. Oh, wow. Now I sound very loud. Okay. Amazing. I'm going to introduce myself in a different way, and we're going to take it from here, okay? I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a colleague. I'm a neighbor. I'm an introvert. Yes, many people don't believe that. I'm an introvert. I'm a traveler. I'm a troublemaker. I love math. Yes, it is one of my passions. My favorite color is green. I used to be able to see when I was younger. If you ever want to make me happy, feed me chicken. I love mystery thriller audiobooks. I love horses. I love nature. I drink too much coffee. I'm a woman. I'm Muslim. I'm a blind diplomat. And I'm a person with a disability, and I'm very, very proud of it. So my question, which I know you can't answer it, but think about it. Why did I introduce myself this way? So take a second and think about, why did I introduce myself this way? And there's a really important reason why I did that. First, we all humans across the globe, no matter who we are, share one common thing. The desire to be seen, right? To be heard, and to be valued. We all share that desire, no matter who we are. We want to be seen for who we are as an individual, as a contributor. We want to be heard, and our voices and perspective heard. Our voices do exist, but we want our voices to be heard from a point of value. We're more than just one identity. We're comprised of many different identities, some that are visible, right? And some that are non-apparent, not really that visible. If I'm walking down the street, no one can tell I love to eat chicken, or I love math, right? But when I do walk down the street, people see me as what? As a blind person. Which I am proud to be a person with a disability, don't get me wrong. It's a big part of my identity. But what does society see? Society just sees disability, blind. And what are assumptions and narratives behind that identity? The narrative is not like, oh, is she a daughter? Is she a mother? Is she a caregiver? Is she an employer? Is she a teacher? The narrative is what? The narrative is she's suffering. She's struggling. She's incapable. She needs help. Move out of the way. I sometimes feel like I'm parting the Red Sea like Moses with my cane. How does she do it? Oh my God, she's amazing. She's brave. She's courageous. She's special. I hate that word, even though it's in my title. There's all these narratives, and I categorize them in two main buckets, right? One bucket, the charity, pity narrative. I feel bad for you. You're less than, you're suffering, you're struggling. There's something wrong with you. The other bucket, as we call it in the disability world, inspiration porn. Oh my God, you're so amazing. Why? Because I'm just walking down the street and I'm living my life? Shouldn't that be the norm and the expectation? But we haven't gotten there in our societies. We haven't yet normalized disability as an identity from a positive lens. We haven't yet made an expectation in society where we expect people with disabilities to be out and about in society having jobs and going to schools. How many times I've gone, people are like, have you even graduated from high school? How many times do you have a couple, one without a disability and one with a disability? To the person with a disability, you should feel so grateful. To the person without a disability, oh my God, she's such an angel. Those narratives are still very much present in our lives. What does that mean? That can translate into overarching narratives. Number one, vulnerable population. I hate when I'm called vulnerable. I'm not vulnerable because I'm blind. I'm not vulnerable because I have a disability. I become vulnerable when society forgets and excludes me and doesn't make it accessible, right? Let's make that distinction. Number two, You need to be fixed. Well, I'm saying you to the person with a disability, not you all. I don't know who's sitting there. But the person with a disability needs to be fixed versus fixing and making society more accessible for all. Society tends to do what? Hey, you're a person with a disability, there's something wrong with you, you need to be fixed. I've had many conversations, including with high-level government folks, where one time someone turns to me and says, Sara, my goal is for me to cure your blindness. I was like, oh. And this was in a government official meeting. I was like, my goal is for you to create a world where I can exist as a blind person. I don't want you to change my disability. I don't want you to take away my blindness. It's part of who I am. Don't take that away. I'm proud to be a person with a disability. But what I want you to do is fix the system to make it accessible for me and for everyone else, because you know what? That's going to benefit everyone. We all know about what? The curb cut effects, right? Curb cuts were created for wheelchair users. Who benefits from that? Everyone, right? Well, let's take that further. Text messaging. Where does text messaging come from? It came from the need of the deaf community, which who uses it now? All of us. Personal example, I was a math major. Classmates would come to me and say, Sara, what classes are you taking next semester? We're like, oh, why? Like, well, whenever you're in the classroom, the professor becomes a better teacher. That's because he or she had to explain better what was on the board. So who benefited? Everyone. So fixing and making the system accessible for everyone, for a person with a disability, will benefit everyone. Number 3. Society says there's one way of doing things, the normal way, and then there's the non-normal way. As they say, special needs. Oh. There's many ways we can navigate this world. A person might turn to me and say, Sara, you're blind. And I had many conversations where the person's like, you have special needs. Well, I turned to them, I was like, you're sighted. In my perspective, you have special needs, you need light. I don't need light to function. You got special needs. So, it's all about how we look at things, right? And let me tell you the power of being a blind diplomat in terms of how it forces us to navigate in a different way. I come into a high-level meeting, I'm meeting with a minister, you know, quote unquote, the typical way is what? To read off of a script. I can't read. I'm not saying I'm illiterate, I can't read. And so what I end up doing, I'm more authentic because I have my points, my high-level points memorized, so I come in and I'm more authentic. But I also do another thing. I say, hey, minister, can you sit right there? I need to be as close to you as possible so I can focus, because it helps me as a blind person to focus on the voice. And that does what? That turns the space, the conversation in a more authentic way. And the many times people come to me and say, Sara, I've never had a more constructive and more authentic meeting than this one. That's the power of my blindness. So when we add different ways of navigating in this world, it will benefit everyone. So again, let's take those overarching narrative. Vulnerability, fixing the person with a disability. There's one way of doing things. The fourth one, we're costly. Isn't it too, you're seen as an add-on. You're too costly to make things accessible. Let's do it later. What people don't realize is when we're excluded from the system and the economy, 1, it impacts the GDP by up to 7%. Okay, guys, that's the smart thing to do, to include us. Include us. 2, we as persons with disability and our family members and friends, our family members, in total we have $13 trillion in disposable income. I think it's more than that, but that's a lot, $13 trillion. But you can't use that disposable income if our infrastructure, a digital infrastructure, our society at large is not accessible. When people don't realize, when you include accessibility from the get-go, it's estimated on average it just costs just around 1% additional cost to the budget. But when you add it later on and modify later on, it can cost up to 20% of the original budget. So not only it's the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do to make it accessible from the get-go. But again, vulnerability, person with a disability needs to be fixed, there's only one way of doing it, and you're too costly. And those narratives still exist in our societies, and that will translate then into policymakers, employers, implementers, program designers. when they're doing their job, there's those narratives that are trickling in terms of how they do their job. And I've seen that in my travels. In the past 2 years, I've been to 40 countries. And I've seen it when there's emergency plan responses for countries and they're leaving out the disability community. And I've seen it when a crisis hits, the disability community is left behind, and the disability community feels like we're an acceptable loss. I've seen it when climate solutions are being designed without our needs and perspectives at the table. I've seen it when digital economic frameworks are being designed without accessibility being at the table. When care policy, and we're doing policy around caregivers, it doesn't take into the consideration that people with disabilities can be caregivers and care receivers, and there's a lens of support that needs to be at the table. I've seen it where microfinance lending in the global south, only 0.5% of microfinance lending goes to persons with disabilities, entrepreneurs. 0.5%. I can go on forever. But I see it everywhere I go. We are either left out, we're not seen, or we're either brought in from a protection lens. Sorry. Instead of, I don't want to be protected, I want to be included. I want to be seen from a point of value. So now what do we do, right? Countries are trying to find solutions, but what they end up doing is quick fixes, technical solution. For instance, employment. There's an employment challenge and problem across the globe when it comes to disability inclusion. So what countries will do is say, okay, great, we have the solution. 2% quota law. So what ends up happening, companies will either then pay the fine, so they don't have to achieve that 2%, or companies will put persons with disabilities on payroll and tell them then don't come into work because they don't want to figure out how to include them in their work setting, or they will pigeonhole persons with disability into certain job sectors. They're not addressing the issue at hand. We don't want quick fixes. We don't want technical fixes. It's a bigger adaptive challenge. You need to break down barriers across every single layer. When it comes to employment, for instance, how do we make sure there's upskilling, there's education? We're breaking down barriers when it comes to applying to jobs. We're breaking down barriers in terms of accommodation and accessibility. We're breaking down barriers across every single path when it comes to employment. But society doesn't look at it that way. So here's what we need to do, is the adaptive work. First step, to address any of this work, we first need to have the difficult conversation. Is anyone having those conversations where people sit down and say, oh my God, actually, you're too costly, or you're less than, or you're incapable, or there's only one way? We need to have those difficult conversations. If we're not, we're never going to address those narratives. Number two, we need to create shared responsibility. I'm so friggin' tired that disability inclusion only falls on the shoulders of persons with disabilities. We need to engage the ecosystem of our society. Bring all stakeholders, including non-conventional stakeholders like media, entertainment industry, the private sector, so everyone can carry that work forward. Then we need to build capacity. There's amazing practices that I've seen during my travels, like an organization teaching farmers with disability in Chiang Mai, Thailand, or a disability innovation tech hub in a university in Kenya, or in Chile, they've developed a national care policy that's inclusive of disability in a holistic way. Let's share those practices. Let's learn from each other. Let's share the stories of value as well, but not just within the disability community. We need to share across the globe. We all are dealing globally with common themes. Climate crisis, right? Digital inclusion. AI is becoming our future. And if accessibility and disability is not at the table, it's going to be a cost on society, a loss on society, cost of lives, further marginalizing us, further excluding us from the economy. But on the other hand, we are a community of 1.3 persons with disability that brings innovation and value and perspective that will help these solutions. Bring us to the table. But let me be real, the table might not be accessible. So my ask of you I mean, it's for real. My ask of you is let's break down barriers so we can bring persons with disability to the table and break down the barriers from physical, communication, narrative, so our voices are heard in the global challenges that we're dealing with from a point of value, so we can get to a point, nothing without us, nothing without the disability community. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope we have a good rest of the day.